Welcome to One on One. I am Cyril Stover. Good governance in Nigeria is about transparency, accountability, and justice. Now, the citizens look up to their leaders to serve them and deploy the nation's resources to the benefit of the people equitably. But in a country of some 200 million citizens and about 250 ethnic groups, how do you ensure that everyone has a voice? Now, this is a question that Nigeria's successive administrations have attempted to address while supposedly practicing federalism. Today, our focus is on equity, transparency, and other issues affecting the Nigerian state. My guest is a lawmaker who comes with a background of a chartered accountant, an industrialist, environmentalist, a farmer and exporter, and a patron of the arts. Senator Dafinone is a member of the 10th Senate representing Delta Central Senatorial District. He is chairman of the Senate Committee on Federal Character and Intergovernmental Affairs, as well as vice chairman of the Legislative Compliance Committee. Senator Dafinone, welcome to One on One.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Right. We talked about successive administrations in Nigeria trying to address the question about every citizen having a voice, and so many introductions through, of course, democracy and what has generally been referred to as democratic dividends have been put in place. But you think that generally administrations, governments have succeeded in placing the citizens' interest as priority?
Let me start by saying that the journey is a long one, and we are, in my opinion, still at the beginning of that journey. There are many Western democracies that are 200 plus years old. Nigeria, in that scheme, is still a very young democracy, and we are still learning to get it right. But if you look at our story from the Fourth Republic, starting 1999, and look at the elections that have been held from 1999 till date, there is a significant improvement with each passing election. So 1999, President Obasanjo came in. 2003, the elections that happened that year, there were stories about governors celebrating their victory a week before the elections. But if you roll forward to 2023, Nigerians appreciate that they should register to vote, get the permanent voters' cards, and step out and vote on election day. So the turnout of Nigerians coming out to vote with each election and understanding the issues to which they vote for is growing with each passing election. Citizens appreciate that they do have a voice and they do have a vote that they can use to control, direct, and put those in office who would speak for them. So the system is improving, is not perfect, but we are getting there.
All right.
But sorry.
Yes.
Just also remember that Western democracy also runs at the same time as we have our community and local system of governance. So within my senatorial district, for example, we have communities that report to dukes and dukes that report to the king. And so our traditional ruler has a system of governance that gives everybody within his kingdom a voice through that system as well. So we can talk about Western democracy and elections and voting and government, but there are other channels for people having a voice as well. And this, I've just mentioned, is one example of such a voice.
Do these channels adequately serve the people? That's the big question, because you do find oftentimes one administration comes in and leaves, and suddenly you hear voices saying perhaps the previous was more like it.
That comparison will never end. So we have, for example, today, the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in charge since 2023. And he comes in with a wave of euphoria that, new broom coming to do more, and the masses of Nigerians vote for him to be the president. And shortly after he comes in, there's a criticism that these are the hardest times Nigerians have ever had, and that the previous administration was much better, that these times are much too hard. This won't happen in all cases, but in this specific case, our president sat back and he said, look, we have to do things a bit different in order for Nigerians to be on the right trajectory. So if you imagine our president looking back and saying that, look, in the 1960s, Nigeria was at a comparable stage to those Asian tigers, Thailand, Singapore, etc. And today, those countries are so far ahead of us. But the route they took to get where they are today was that for a large part of the 60s and 70s, those countries tightened their belt, shut down their borders, and concentrated on developing their economies. Nigeria were rich in oil, and we were lending money to the IMF. I mean, this is the position of those days. And we had it too easy. So our president comes in and says, no, Nigeria, tighten your belt. Let's get this right. And so in the last 3 years, our president has taken some of the hardest decisions for the country that have been taken in maybe the last 20 years, trying to see if we can stop the drain on our resources that was coming from the fuel subsidy, electricity subsidy, foreign exchange subsidy, etc. Also bringing policies on tax and other areas like local government that have tried to restructure the economy and make it more efficient. Of course, that has brought about harder times for Nigerians. But in the short term, the long-term journey is one of recovery and setting our eyes on the target of catching those Asian tigers and overtaking them. But we're not going to get there if we sit back in bed and think that where we are is the right way to go. So criticisms will come, but a president or a government that feels that they must continually stand up for a beauty contest where you say, look, I'm not taking those decisions. If I do, I will lose votes and I won't be voted back. We'll never get where we're going. We need a government that will say, no, that's the right way to go. Nigerians may not like me for it, but I know that's the right way to go, and I'm taking the country there. And that's where we are today.
All right. One of the biggest debates in terms of governance in the country is who gets what, deployment of the country's resources, and both human and material resources. With cries of marginalization, this is as old as the Republic itself. Different segments of society, they've been marginalized or dominated. They say democracy is about numbers. But when you apply these to the question of who gets what at what time, it does leave a lot of questions unanswered. And perhaps that was where the principle of federal character came in. You chair that committee. And the question has been, is it a fair system? Is it a fair principle? Does it really address the issues?
Well, our committee and the commission is out there to try and make sure the balance is kept, to make sure that all Nigerian citizens from every part of the country have a fair opportunity to participate in not just federal affairs, not just employment, but also in terms of participation in governance, participation at state, local, and federal levels. But let me take one specific aspect of the fairness that you look at, and that comes about with the cry for state creation that we have every few years, where Nigerians from all around the country group themselves into different groups within their state to cry for a state for a smaller recognition. Now, what that is a cry for more resources for their area. And simply put, if the system was working where resources were equitably distributed, Nigerians should not cry for more states. They should be satisfied that the resources that they need for development in their area is being equitably distributed, and even if you had more states, the distribution would still be the same. What we have instead is leaders from all around the country cry out for more states in the hope that they, as individuals, or they as a smaller collective, will enjoy more benefits. Now, this argument, when you take it through several iterations, gets to the point where in order to get, let me give a realistic example. So within Delta State, you have my senatorial district, Delta Central, and we now cry for more resources. So we go and we form a smaller state. Let's call it Ethiop State. Ethiop State now has more resources. Of course, the cost of governance for the whole country has gone up because we have additional states. Now, within this Ethiop State, where we have just the Urobo people, my people, one group, maybe the, let's say the Ukbe tribe, say that we're not getting a fair share. So we need our own state. So we now carve up this Ethiop State into maybe 4 more states. I don't know if you can see where the journey is going, where I have my own personal state, which is my plot of land. It doesn't solve the problem. What we need is a system where resources are equitably distributed and transparently so that everybody appreciates that you don't need your own little state to get your share. You will get it anyway.
In the deployment of, if you like the word, the sharing of offices, appointments, has it been equitable? Has the principle of federal character really addressed it? Because there are some critics who say federal character may be good, but it compromises on merit.
Yes, it will compromise on merit. But we are a federation and running a federal system. It would be unfair to say that the people of Katsina State should not have a fair share in participating in government. And it is only through giving all segments of the country a fair opportunity that everybody's standard rises. If you don't do that, then you would find that government is dominated by one specific or 2 specific groups at the unfortunate position of putting others in the background. It's a developmental stage solution. Clearly, when we get further down the line, and all parts of the country are getting a proper education, have scholars emerging in all fields, then it will be more by competition. Also, when we get to the stage equally where resources are properly being shared equitably without you having to have your brother in that office, your state, your tribe will get their fair share, then there's no need for that sharing again.
But it has not always been so, in keeping to the principles, and that's where You've had allegations of violations, non-compliance, and one group dominating the other in federal appointments, in the civil service, and you hear that all the time. So what's the way out of that?
Well, our committee at the Senate does oversight on all federal government institutions, and we ask them to come in, show us their records, and where we see the anomalies, we give them steps to take in order to correct it. So typically you'll find that where a chief executive is from one part of the country and he's in office for 4 years, most of the new employees under his regime come from his area. And that, I appreciate that it's his turn, as we say, but it must be done with some fairness. You cannot have 90% of the recruits while you're in office for 4 years all coming from your area. It unbalances it completely.
And this has been happening, really. And there has been a push for sanctions, for non-compliance. Where is that going? Because even us, sometimes, yes, your committee summons chief executives, and the outcomes are never really known. Somewhere along the line, no one hears anything anymore. We don't hear, are there sanctions for non-compliance? There was also talk about pushing a tribunal for those who refuse to comply.
So we're an arm of government and we have an oversight function. So within our powers, we are able to recommend suggestions to the MDAs for a better leveling up of what should be the equitable distribution of jobs within the institution. And we do that, and clearly, where you have significant offenders, our report is public. Debates and resolutions on reports of committees is open to the public, and Nigerians will see that, look, Senator Dafinone, as chief executive of this organization, employed 1,000 people, and 900 of them came from his village. I mean, you know, questions will be asked. And government would not want to keep a chief executive on seat who has clearly not followed that federal character principle. It's important for the balance of government.
Well, in terms of fairness, I want to take it to, for instance, the civil service, where highly qualified personnel have what has been described as delayed promotions because some principle demands that the top echelon is evenly spread. And where you find some areas that are considered disadvantaged now gain the upper hand at the detriment of those who are highly qualified, and they can't make it. It's easier for some people from some parts to rise to the top, while others, not for want of not being qualified, cannot progress as fast as that. Is that fair?
Nobody will say the system is perfect, but the system relies on the intakes at the bottom of the pyramid coming in with a fair distribution. Now, if you have a crop of a particular year's intake that has excelled a group from a particular tribe or part of the country that has excelled over the period of their employment and have risen to the top, you cannot, because now you get to labor principles and rules of civil service employment. You cannot say that you are going to keep somebody who scores brilliant marks at his examinations. You cannot say you're not going to promote him. So those people would have to be promoted. You cannot hold them back under a fair system. So where the system is working, people would feed through the system according to merit also. Civil servants take exams to get promotion. And if you don't do well at the exams, you should not be promoted.
Okay, that may well be so in theory, but in practice, where you do have 10 people writing an examination, and those who score the highest marks happen to be from one part, and there are 6 of them, and then 4 others with very low marks, in trying to adhere to this principle, you elevate 2 of the 4 who have inferior marks to the 6. What does that do for productivity? And it's all about the fairness that we talk about.
Yeah, so there will be exceptions, but the rules are there to make sure that those who are excelling rise to the top. You cannot have a structure, civil service or private sector, where you are promoting people that are failing exams to the detriment of those who are passing. So I'm not sure that, and I'm not an expert on civil service employment, but I'm not sure that that would be the case, where you are promoting people because they're from a particular part of the country, even though they failed exams. I'm not sure that would happen.
All right. Senator, you also are the Vice Chairman of the Legislative Compliance Committee. Let's talk about that briefly. That also has led to sometimes a face-off between lawmakers and MDAs, and they feel that they have been summoned too often to appear before the Senate, and sometimes there's a feeling that these requests are not truly about oversight functions, but about other considerations, and where they are hesitant to comply, there are threats of arrests. What do you say to that?
I think you'll find that in order for the Senate to do its job, they must talk to responsible leaders of the MDAs in order to make sure that decisions arrived at, discussions had, can be relied upon as being the representation of the organization. So the Senate will often insist on having the chief executive there, and if not available, very often we will accept to receive, so for example, if it's a finance matter, the finance director, so as to make sure that he can speak on behalf of the organization, with a letter from the chief executive to say that this chap will represent us at this hearing, then we would happily entertain that. That there is a feeling that there are too many summons coming from the National Assembly. It's possible that sometimes we go through periods where there are a lot of calls for a particular corporation or department to come to the Senate or to the National Assembly. And a government agency or department may fall under the supervision of 3, 4, 5 committees in the Senate, and then a similar number in the House of Reps. So it can get to a point where, 3 different committees are summoning a chief executive in the same week. It does happen. It's unfortunate that we cannot all streamline our schedules to make sure that...
Yes, but isn't there a way to streamline all of these? Without mentioning names, I know of a number of executives of MDAs who have complained that they had been summoned by the Senate, and 2 other committees in the House had summoned them, and all were within 48 hours. And they also had a lot of pressing issues in their agencies, and it would be virtually impossible to attend to all those. And a number of times we have also seen lawmakers reject representation and insist that only the chief executive can.
So I just mentioned that, and so where there is a responsible executive at the top of the organization, most meetings of the Senate would accept an alternative representation. So on finance matters, like I said, the finance director. But to imagine that the schedules of all the committees could be funneled into one book and come out the other end, it would be nearly impossible. We do allow the chief executives to say that, look, I'm not available this week, that I'm attending to matters abroad or attending to a conference or meetings, and could you reschedule me for a week's time or 2 weeks' time? And that happens very often. The Senate is not hard on keeping to a date that has been agreed. If it is no longer convenient, come back with an alternative proposal. And that one I can be sure of.
Well, would you say that there has largely been compliance and only a few cases have had challenges with that?
You mean compliance with invitations?
Yes, with
to
invitations
attend?
and...
Well, most chief executives also have hectic schedules, and so they are hard-pressed to attend to all requests for meetings from the National Assembly. But, you know, I want to say that our former finance minister, Wale Edu, he rarely missed an appointment with the Senate, rarely missed. Our CBN governor was at the National Assembly yesterday. He met with the Senate Committee on Banking. And he's another person who rarely misses an invitation from the National Assembly. There are chief executives who regard an invitation as it should be. There will be some that feel that, no, I don't want to come in and answer questions, and feel that it is an intrusion.
Okay.
But let me give you an example of something that was possibly televised earlier this week. We have a Finance Committee public hearing looking into internally generated revenue. And a particular government agency came in to say that they had, over the last 3 years, raised internally, averaging about 25 million for each of the 3 years going by. And according to the law, they're meant to remit 100% of that to the federal government coffers, 25 million naira on average. And they had put forward a case that they should only remit 25% of that. Now, the Fiscal Responsibility, FRC, Fiscal Responsibility Commission, I think it is, had met with them, investigated, and found that they should remit 100%. In the first year, they now remitted 100%, but in the next 2 years, they were waiting for a reconciliation to say whether they should remit 100% again. Clearly, that reconciliation would lead them to remitting 100%. Now, I raised the argument that you're sitting here from your organization squabbling over whether the additional 17 million naira should be remitted to the federal government coffers. But that same organization was receiving between 3 and 10 billion naira from the federal government as a grant, a subvention. And they're busy squabbling over remitting 16 million naira. I told them off. Why are you here dribbling us around for 16 million naira? The organization is much larger than that. Pay the full 25 million to the federal government. That is the law. Don't dribble us here. So sometimes these chief executives are up to no good also.
Well, at this point, we'll take a short break. When we return, we'll be talking about local content and the drive for industrialization. So stay with us.
PM on NTA Network.
Thanks for staying with us. I'm still here with Senator Ide Dafinone, Chairman of the Senate Committee on Federal Character and Intergovernmental Affairs. Well, Senator, you also are in the Local Content Committee. Let's get an insight into how local content can drive industrialization in this country.
The Local Content Act comes about because within the oil sector especially, Nigerians found that all jobs, large and small, were being done by foreigners. And it was felt that certain sizes of jobs, certain personnel requirements should be able to be staffed from local staff. And so the Local Content Act is designed to increase gradually the local expertise and encourage Nigerians to participate more in the oil sector. Clearly, it spans out further into other sectors as the Act will be expanded over the years to ensure that Nigerians participate fully in all sectors, not just the oil sector.
And this has led to diversification?
When you say diversification,
well, the economy, and we have more people getting the expertise. The argument usually is that there is a deficit of expertise in many of these fields, and therefore most organizations or most high-level enterprises would bring in people with the relevant expertise from other countries.
So the Local Content Act encourages Nigerians to learn those skills and have local expertise here that can take on those jobs. So things like underwater welding, that 50 years ago we brought in people from abroad to do underwater welding. Now we have enough Nigerians that can do that. And so, I mean, that is even at the small end of the scale, but we have Nigerian companies that are laying pipelines where we didn't have that before. So the expertise grows, and over time we should develop the capacity to be able to compete fairly nationally and internationally with our local skills.
You represent Delta Central, or the Senate. So let's talk about infrastructure development in the Niger Delta, which is your area. And you have been pushing for that. The thinking is that a lot has been done towards improving the infrastructure in the Niger Delta through various government initiatives. You have the ministry, you have the commission. Have those impacted reasonably on the Niger Delta?
They have, and they continue to. The NDDC, for example, is more productive in the last 2 or 3 years than I have seen them over the last 20. And so we begin to get it right. The Ministry of Niger Delta supervised the NDDC, but now with the establishment of the zonal commissions, they're now supervising the zonal commissions. Now, this establishment of zonal commissions is also an indication that the formula for NDDC also worked. Bearing in mind that the NDDC and the South-South Development Commission aren't equal to each other. No, it's not a duplication, it's not an overlap.
Yeah, well, you know, because the South-South, Niger Delta, and, you know, when this was set up, a number of questions were raised, and it seemed as there was going to be an overlap, or was it duplication? You don't think so?
No, there are states within the NDDC that are not South-South states. And so there are, I mean, the NDDC is specifically to look at the damage done to the environment over the years from the oil production, and also to plan for the way forward. The South-South Development Commission is there to plot development for the South-South. And yes, there will be some areas of overlap where both are looking at roads and both are looking at commercial activity. But because of the specific problem of the damages to the environment and to the economy of the Niger Delta, it is more focused on that, not just on the general development.
Well, now that you speak of the environment, it brings us to the other part of your resume. You've been described as an environmentalist, and of course you chaired the Nigerian Conservation Foundation for 8 years. How well is Nigeria doing in terms of protecting the environment, especially now that we're talking about carbon credits? How well are we doing? How serious is Nigeria, you think?
It's a fight to still get it right. Nigerians must choose in many circumstances between the economic benefit of, for example, cutting down trees to the carbon credits that come from these trees and these forests. One of the biggest projects we had at the NCF, the Nigerian Conservation Foundation, was our Green Recovery Project, where we were trying to get the forest cover of Nigeria from the current level of about 3% to 25%. We actually got old photographs from space to show forest cover going back to the 50s and the 60s. And when you put the photographs up, you see the disappearing forest cover over the last 70, 80 years. It's like a disaster where we are being desertified, if you like, with the forest cover disappearing at an alarming rate. Other countries are planting trees. You have stories of people flying over the Amazon with millions of seeds, just throwing the seeds down into the Amazon in order to regenerate the forest. We have a long way to go. There is...
Yes, but how do you balance the demands for industrialization, industrial growth, urbanization, and environmental protection?
We have to find a balance. The wetlands zones in Nigeria, some of the most rich in biodiversity in the whole world. We have several very rare species of animals found in the Auburn Hills on the Cross River borders. And to protect those species is something that is important, not just to Nigerians or Cross Riverians, but to globally. Disappearing animals, you imagine, we tell our children of dinosaurs that were here millions of years ago, but if we don't take care, our grandchildren won't know what a gorilla looks like. It would just be something in a comic book or on a screen. So protecting those species that are part of our development, part of our atmosphere is important. Also, some of the plants and animals that are being preserved could be the source of a cure for various diseases in years to come. So, you know, we do need to keep a hold on that and to make sure that the environment is preserved.
You are an industrialist, and it's considered that Nigeria is not one of the big polluters of the environment, and in fact we could use more of our industries coming back to life. Mm-hmm. And so some argue and say, we don't think that we are in that category where we should worry so much. In fact, we need the industries to come back on stream. We described you as a farmer. The opening of this program, rubber was your main thing, and you were an exporter of that too. And it's clear that the drive, the Nigerian industrial sector has gone down for so many years. And how do we, I asked for a balance earlier on, the need to grow more industries and the question of the environment. The big polluters are not paying that much attention to it, so why should we?
You're right, and there's global arguments that those big polluters should be sending us reparations, if you like, to compensate for us and our forests that are giving the carbon solution. But let's go back a little bit and look at the industries that we say need to come back. The last 40 or 50 years have seen industries suffer from a higher cost of operation. So the costs for a lot of industries are the cost of power, cost of security, and equally the general cost of doing business in Nigeria, which is rated as something that is above average than the global average. And the government is looking at those aspects to make Nigeria more investment friendly. State governments are looking at their own states to see how they can attract more investment. They realize with more investment coming in, there will be more jobs created and more prosperity, more internally generated revenue also. The future relies on that investment coming in, and the records over the last 1 year show that we are moving in that direction with investment coming in from overseas, growing. FDI numbers are increasing in a favorable direction.
All right. Well, speaking of investments, you have been pushing for investments, and a project which I do believe you're passionate about is the development of a seaport. You're from Sapele.
That's right.
And that, of course, is of interest to you, the development of the Sapele port. Tell us about that. Right.
Well, Sapele Port, years back in the 80s, was this hive of activity and brought with it some economic development to the town of Sapele and the surrounding areas. And it was taken over by the Navy some years back, and the commercial activity has stopped completely. Now, my people within Sapele local government believe, and I do as well, that if the port was to come alive again with commercial activity, then there would be a growth in economic development because of the activities surrounding the port. So I have pushed over the last few years for the port to be concessioned to a private operator so that we could have economic activity around the port. In fact, at one of my meetings with Mr. President, I raised it that if I came to him to say, Mr. President, we need a port in Sapele, he would look at me and say, we don't have funds to build a port in Sapele, so the economic development you're asking for is coming at too high a cost. But then, Mr. President, we already have the port. All we need to do now is to concession it so that private operators would come in and operate the port to create that economic activity that we need, that would create a mini boom around the port that would influence the whole town. So we're looking at it. It's part of the government's agenda. You would have seen a few months back, the president on a trip to the UK came back with a package deal where 3 ports within Nigeria, including the Warri port, are going to be developed with facilities from overseas. So it's something that the government is looking at to see if we can have centers of development that will cause economic prosperity for our people.
And does the other project you're pushing for fit into this airport, Ushubi Airport?
So you know, businesses develop around appropriate infrastructure. So, for example, we talk of the port and the trade that would come because of the port, even if it is only rubber or other crops that would be ferried along the coast or further afield, it brings about an economic activity. So similarly, I have suggested that Osubi Airport could be used as an export hub where we have export facilities around the Osubi Airport and then develop a agricultural zone to export crops, flowers, whatever, to the European market. Similar to what happens at the moment in Nairobi, where the Nairobi airport has 2 or 3 jumbos flying out every day with fruits, with flowers, with vegetables that are going straight into stores within 24 hours in Europe. I believe that we have enough land available that can do a similar thing all around Osubi.
Well, Senator, as we begin to wind down on this conversation, we feel we should take you up on a general belief, and I'm sure that you must have heard it yourself, about executive-legislature relations and what has been dubbed as the romance between the legislature and the executive. And you hear this said over and over again, that the National Assembly is not nearly carrying out that function that it ought to be doing as an arm of government, and in most times is a term being described as a rubber stamp of the executive. Do you agree with that?
Well, you know, we started off this program talking about the National Assembly oversight function taking up a lot of time of the executives, and the executives not wanting to attend to the requests of the National Assembly. Midway through, I gave you an example of a government agency that was trying to dribble us over a petty amount of money when they had received a huge amount of money. Both those examples don't talk rubber stamp. And if you watch some of the televised debates, the NNPC has been dragged over hot coals at our session on public accounts. I am front and center of that meeting. Definitely there's no rubber stamping going on there. I'm sure NNPC would not agree that we are being a rubber stamp. So there are aspects of policy where the Senate agrees with the executive, and when we do, there is no need to cause a song and dance about it in order to get to the same goal. If we all agree with what should be done, I don't believe that there should be an unnecessary objection. But where we don't agree, you will see the Senate in full session having loud debates on what should be done. And this has happened over many issues over the last 3 years. So, you know, people tend to look at the issues we have agreed on and say that we are walking in line with the executive. But if we agree with what they're doing, it shouldn't...
So it's not really a case of whatever the president wants, he gets from the National Assembly, and whichever way he wants it, the National Assembly is only too quick to assent.
I think you'll find that we are 109 senators with different backgrounds from different political parties, with different histories and different ambitions, different directions. And to get 109 senators to dance in the same direction over 3 years is impossible. There are dissenting voices in the Senate on every issue. There's no issue you would have 109 senators agreeing completely on. So, yes, take an example. Let's make it real. The tax bill. Yeah? There are those who would say that the National Assembly rubber-stamped the tax bill. But you're Nigerian. You heard the debates. There was rancor in both houses over the tax bill. Is that an example of a rubber stamp? No. But, you know, the public commentators will take a piece of that and say, no, the rubber stamp, that was definitely not a rubber stamp.
One final issue, Senator, and this has to do with budgeting. And there's so much talk about the insertion of certain provisions for certain institutions that have no business doing that. You find budgets being approved for an education institution to construct roads in a place that is totally out of its area of purview. And sometimes those agencies have been taken up and they say, well, this was done at the instance of the Senate. Is this true?
Yes, that does happen. I won't say it doesn't. It does happen, but it is something that in the, I think, 2025 budget, if not 2026, definitely, the President had a clear instruction on the budget preparation that agencies that deal with roads should have roads as their focus. So projects that are to do with hospitals should not show up in a budget for a road institution. And so that anomaly is being examined and treated. It is clearly not the way to go. There should be specialized treatment of all items, but definitely we're moving in that direction.
All right, well, I would like to leave this conversation here and thank you very much for coming on one-on-one. Senator Ide Dafinone, Chairman, Senate Committee on Federal Character and Intergovernmental Affairs, we thank you for coming on one-on-one.
Thank you very much.
Right. And that's our program today. Thank you for watching. Next week, we'll be back with one-on-one. I'm Cyril Stover. Bye for now.